I'm Coffee Kevin. I have a special guest today. Before we start hearing their interesting story, I'd like to share some breaking CoffeeCon live news. We'll have 3 locations for our January 9 live event. We'll be bringing you live presentations from Klatch Coffee in Los Angeles, Mr. Espresso in Oakland, and Metropolis here in Chicago. I'll be hosting it all right here in Warrenville. Wait, there's more. Alan Adler, inventor of the AeroPress, will be speaking to us live from Oakland and sharing his story of the AeroPress. What led him to invent it? How does he use his own design to brew coffee? Lots and lots of fascinating details. We've had him as a guest presenter once before at our first San Francisco CoffeeCon. It was standing room only, and the audience was riveted. Be sure not to miss it. We're hoping to have our ticket site up soon so you can register. You won't believe the price. Now, recently Tom Maegdlin of Hansa Coffee contacted me and told me he'd found a Kenya coffee he wanted me to try. I'm sure Tom recalls a number of times I've whined about not finding the great Kenyas I've learned to love. Well, he found one and insisted I try it. Last week, I donned my mask and ventured to Hansa and both had a cup of coffee there with Kevin Kane, Hansa's co-owner, and picked up a bag. Let's just say I've brewed nothing since. It's got that old world Kenya taste. It has chocolate nibs and a wild wininess that only Kenya has. I could easily see someone claiming it as their favorite. Indeed, it's one of mine. Next day, I got on a Zoom call with Tom and Dan Melone, Asali Hills co-owner who imports this coffee. Our discussion, I think, speaks for itself. Let's join in now. I'm here with Dan Melone, and Dan has a coffee farm, right, Dan?
That is correct, in Western Kenya, in the region of Mount Elgon, near a town called Kimilili town.
Kimilili town. And is that a big city or is that a very small city?
It's just a small town in Western Kenya. Yeah, it's along the Ugandan-Kenyan border. In fact, the border of Uganda pretty much runs straight through the caldera of Mount Elgon, so it's not too far from the Ugandan border.
Interesting. And of course, sitting next to you, Tom Maegdlin and I go way back. Tom, you are co-owner of Hansa Coffee Roasters?
Amongst other things, but yes, that's my favorite job that I have. And hey, say hi, Kevin. There's the other owner, Kevin Kane.
Hi, Kevin.
How are you? Serendipitously
long time no see.
Exactly.
It's good to see you.
Again soon.
All right. And Dan, my understanding is you're actually an archaeologist, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, that is correct. So I've been working with Chapruka, Dr. Chapruka Kusimba. We'll call him Chap from here on out. That's his shortened name. I've been working with him at the Field Museum in the African Anthropology Department in the lab since 1997. And over the years, we would go on expeditions to Kenya. He is from Kenya, from Western Kenya to be precise, and he hails from the Bukusu tribe in Western Kenya. However, Chap is a world-renowned anthropologist and very well respected by many in the field. And he was a professor at UIC, and then he went on to Washington, D.C. And it was during that move that he had told me about how he bought a brand new farm, a very large farm. And so we had dinner together. And as he was on his way back to Oak Park to pack up the rest of his stuff to move back to Washington, D.C., I called him within about 5-10 minutes of departing my driveway. And I said, hey, I'd like to grow coffee with you as well. Is there any chance I could buy some land? And so he arranged for that back in, I believe it was 2014. And, we started to, he planted for me and I went to visit 2015. And we had to wait, of course, for the seedlings to grow. By that point, he has since moved from Washington, D.C. to Tampa. He's now a professor down there at the university. And our last 2 batches, basically, or I should say last 4, we sold to the Nairobi Stock Exchange. But by the by, my wife, Cindy, is the one responsible for bringing me to Hansa. And so she came here with a friend of hers and said, you're really going to enjoy this place. When we came, sat inside in the cafe, it was near evening, still a little light out. And they had the garage doors open and a warm breeze was floating in. And, we're sitting at the table and it just reminded me of being in Kenya. You had the bright lights on the inside. It's getting a little dark outside, that warm breeze. And I looked at her and I said, this is the place where I want to sell my coffee. We're going to make this happen. And so a couple of years later, we still had to wait for these plants to grow. A couple of years later, I approached Tom and his exact words were, look, bring me a sample. We'll roast it, we'll cup it. And if I like it, we'll buy it. If not, I'm sure we can remain friends and work on from there. Brought it in, and I would say that he and the roaster were blown away. I had taken
You're skipping a step.
I had taken, yeah. So I did not know that the coffee needed to have the parchment removed. And so he brought it in, he's like, you need to remove this parchment, it'll set fire in our roaster. So I had a grad student, I might as well just, Heather, I would like to thank her publicly for this. She and I sat at my kitchen table, and then we brought it here into the coffee shop, and we just pulled it apart by hand.
200 grams of deparchment coffee that he was able to do by hand.
We processed it by hand. And so I brought it in, and I gave it over to Tom. Ted roasted it, and the big day arrived. We cupped it, and they loved it. And he said, if this could be that good and you process this by hand, I cannot wait to try it when it's processed through the proper methods, of, the milling methods. And so as of late, what was it, maybe 2019, Asali Hills was born. And so Asali is the Swahili word for honey. And Chap has hives all over the farm. In fact, we're installing, I believe, 300 more as we speak. He just sent the images to me yesterday. So Asali is the Swahili word for honey. And because we're in the foothills of Mount Elgon, it just seemed appropriate to call the farm Asali Hills. It rolls off the tongue, and it says everything within the name of what our farm is, what the estate is.
I think it's really important to point out that Professor Kusimba bought this deforested piece of property, 125 acres, something around that size?
It was, I think, close to 200 acres is what he basically...
And his dream was really about sustainable farming, but also to reforest this land that had been pretty much been destroyed by cattle ranching. Cattle is very important in Kenya, culturally, economically, just from a subsistence perspective. But he took this land and through some sustainable farming practices, planted a lot of shade trees. So our coffee grows, or Dan's coffee grows, in the midst of these shade trees, in a really amazing setting that is indescribable. The way Western Kenya is to coffee is much like the Napa Valley was in the early 1970s. Everybody knows it's a great place to grow coffee. It's just been neglected from that aspect. There's still, obviously some people have never left, but I really think there's going to be a renaissance in that part of Kenya for coffee growing, because of this younger generation of farmers who are really taking a very specialty approach to the way they grow coffee and process coffee.
Just to get a little background, and Tom, maybe this is more to you, although actually, Dan, you may also know as well, because you certainly spent more time in Kenya, but from a coffee point of view, Kenya used to be a really common and very popular and prized of all the African coffees, frankly, other than I think Ethiopia has always got a special place because of history. But Kenya, as far as was, to me, always the quintessential high-end coffee from Africa. And it just seemed to disappear for years. What happened?
Kenya's really a tea growing. It's more famous for tea than it is for coffee. But because we're not a tea drinking culture like the Europeans are, it's not as pervasive. I can't pinpoint when it dropped off, but I did notice it drop off. But the second renaissance we are having now in Kenya, really, and Kevin, you and I have talked about this a lot, has to do with the experimental processing that we're starting to see. the cultivars that are being planted, Ruyu, Baton, SL28, crops like that are really, they're becoming famous. People want those crops, but also things like anaerobic processing, things like carbonic maceration, which I don't know if you've had any coffee processed in that regard, but it's essentially a high carbon environment. It's the same way they process Beaujolais Nouveau in France, and it creates this floral bouquet, almost like fruit punch type of coffee. So, things like that are putting Kenya back on the upslope, and it's really amazing to see. I'm watching this unfold before my eyes.
It is very exciting, actually, and of course, I think one of the things, just say this about Hansa, one of the things I really admire about you as roasters is you seem to really always be pushing the envelope on whatever it is, you embrace it and kind of will do an experiment, and even to carry a small coffee like this, a small lot. I mean, this is pretty limited, isn't it? I mean, you couldn't supply Starbucks, could you, with this, would you, Dan?
Maybe one store for a week. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's so, so we started at a very high baseline with Dan and Chap's coffee. The varietals it was Ruyu and Baton that were the two varietals that Chap planted on the farm, on Dan's parcel and on his parcel. The coffee from that standpoint is excellent. Organic fertilizer, very high quality. I'll send pictures of the cherries. We'll post them in the comments of the video. You can see pictures of the farm. Started at a very high level, but through this partnership that Dan and I have with the farm and with Dr. Kusimba, people like his niece Christabel, who are the estate manager of the farm, we've purchased a new pulper for the property, mechanized, which has already made an amazing difference. We've built brand new beds. Dr. Kusimba just invested for this small harvest for the flying crop this year, invested about $2,200 just in beds for drying. And also we had a trainer from the cooperative come down and instruct them on cherry selection, better standards and practices, and also instructed them on how to naturally process the coffee, which, Kevin, you know that if I ever talk to you, we're going to be talking about naturals.
I know.
It's my favorite. It's what got me into specialty coffee. So, just in the past 2 months, the trajectory that this farm is on is something to be. I'm shocked and amazed by the work that's been done on the farm by the farmers, by the ownership group already. So.
It's amazing, quite honestly, and I tell people all the time, the Kenyan people are not only some of the nicest, generous people that you'll ever meet, but they're amazing. I mean, honestly, it amazes me at the things that they can get done. The things that, if we were here in the States, would take us weeks, maybe months.
They had those beds built in a day.
And it's just amazing the hard work that everyone had put into it. Going everything from Chap himself, the investment that he made personally into that farm and the things that he has done, especially like Tom said recently with the beds, the amount of money that he put in for himself. We couldn't do this without him. We couldn't do it without the actual farm workers themselves. And we couldn't do it without our estate manager, Christabel. And then, of course, back here in the U.S., and as well as in many ways back on the farm, we couldn't do it without Kevin, who just went off that way. Kevin Kane and Tom here, without their support, helping to sell our coffee, to publicize it, invest in the farm with the defruiting machine, the depulper. It's amazing on how everything has come together so quickly, especially during COVID. It's absolutely bonkers. I'd like to point out also really quickly, in case there are questions, our workers on an average, regular farm workers, not our workers in this case. I know I start off with our workers. On average in that area, a Kenyan laborer gets paid $30 a month. Okay, now it's a different economy out there. I know people will gasp when they hear that. Our workers on the estate they are almost, in fact, even over triple digits for what they make a month. Okay. And, when I have this conversation with the average person here, they still gasp at that. Like, my God, how, again, different economy, different way of life. It's just,
it's life-changing money.
It's life-changing
It's
money.
life-changing
It
money.
really
You can
is.
send a kid to school on that money there, which is, we've only had how much we barely have a few hundred plants planted this year, and they just planted 10,000 more seedlings. So the growth curve that the farm is on is quite honestly amazing.
I mean, we are taking care of our workers. The plan is to get them really good footwear, really good clothing. We're going to send someone out there to check on their dental, teeth. We want physicians out there to check their health. So we are going to really invest not only in the land, I mean, we can do that all day long, but in the people themselves, because they are doing this for us. So we need to really take care of them and make sure that they have a rich lifestyle as well.
It's a really great working partnership.
It sounds ideal. Of course, and I have to say, in the specialty world, which really is, I'm sorry to say this to the industry, but really quite a capitalist economy. It is, if the coffee doesn't have the chops in the cup, it doesn't matter. I mean, all those things. Those are for me as a perhaps a Christian, or as a person who likes to imagine themselves a good Christian, I would say, yeah, that's wonderful. But it's also great to have a coffee that also tastes like this. I've got some cocoa nibs in the cup yesterday, and some of the spice. I didn't get the Meyer lemon yet, but I've only had a chance to brew it a couple of times in a Chemex, and the molasses came through. I mean, this coffee is really got a lot. It speaks to me. Let's put it that way. And I've missed having Kenya like this. And I think more and more the coffee business is going like the craft beer business in the world, where a small lot, something that's got some unique taste to it, and of course that's really what people are looking for. In addition, it is wonderful to know that it is responsibly produced, and that you actually are taking care of and being fair to the people who produce it is more than fair. It sounds like is great to know.
In the specialty coffee world, that for a long time, and this has been my biggest criticism of the specialty coffee industry since the early 2000s, has really been that white savior narrative, and there's no other way to put it. The way to crush that narrative is to put your money where your mouth is. And the reason I say this is because when push comes to shove, we need to get the people on the ground what they need to produce a great product. And if we can invest, a drop in the bucket, really, for a few $1,000s to somebody like us is not a lot. But when we can make these advancements every year in making the quality of the coffee better, my dream is that I can't afford the coffee in 5 years. Really, my dream is for them to become so well known and produce such a high quality of coffee that it bleeds over into the other farms in the area, which there are. And there are people that are taking a look at what Dr. Kusimba and Dan and Christabel are doing and everybody else are doing on that farm. And I'm making this prediction now. In 10 years, that part of Kenya is going to be the equivalent of the Napa Valley of coffee in East Africa, because of the raw potential of the landscape. But here's the most important thing. As Dan was telling you, Kenyans are the most ingenuitive, hardworking, imaginative people I've ever encountered. And that's what's going to turn this region of Kenya into a powerhouse of specialty coffee production in the next decade.
But at the end of the day, like I came up with the tagline, and I know it sounds cheesy, but it's true. It's not about the coffee. It is about the culture. At the end of the day, at least for me, I will absolutely put a halt to anything that damages any of the culture.
This is, I'm honored that you reached out, and I wanted to try this coffee. I was interested by just the fact that it was a Kenya coffee, and I haven't had too many samples of Kenya, even lately, although I've had a couple more than usual, making me think there was somewhat of a resurgence. But this is, without a doubt, one of the best that I've had. So I'm really impressed that you're this early in your gestation, and I want to commend you. You may be an archaeologist, but you found a really nice coffee that's great within 14 days of roasting.
Well, that's good, and I found better people to help with it as well.
Kevin,
Here.
just a quick note before I lose this train of thought. If you actually take a look at this bag here, what you'll notice is you'll notice several different sized beans. You'll notice several shapes. There's two main varietals in this coffee, Gruyere and Batanas, I told you. But here's the interesting thing, and this is something that we're going to keep doing. We did not screen the pea berry out of this. And what that has done for this coffee is that has added that Meyer lemon subtle sweetness because of the density of the coffee.
Right.
And also, this is one of we did a density score. This is one of the densest coffees we have ever produced. And what that tells me, it's not only the climate and the soil, but it's also the production, the actual processing of the coffee. So not only is it an interesting story, as you said, it has to show up in the cup. And this coffee is really an amazing specimen.
I know I'm going to have people ask me, what's the best way to get a hold of this? And obviously the Chicago area it's obvious come to Hansa, but what about the rest of the country?
HansaCoffee.com. It's right on the front page. If you go under the single origins tab, we have about 200 pounds of it left for this crop. The current crop is actually going on. The current harvest is going on right now. And we're going to have that coffee here. I would probably guess January, February is when we'll see the next crop land. The following harvest will be obviously over the summer. We'll get that coffee in the fall again, and we will have washed and natural versions of that. So be on the lookout for more Asali Hills to come.
And for updates, I would appreciate it if people were to follow us on both Facebook as well as on Instagram under Asali Hills Estate. We're typing Asali Hills Coffee, but it's under Asali Hills Estate. And just start liking the pages, because I do update them daily, quite honestly. Wow. And we put extra tidbits on what is going on the land. They should be able to, if we get some of the pictures from the estate manager from Kenya, you can see people working the land. Sometimes we get.
We also have a link to our T-shirts we're doing to support the farm. It's the Kenya Coffee. Dan's wearing the hoodie. It's the Kenya Coffee Project T-shirts. And it supports, as I said, this is a multi-pronged approach. The goal of the project, not just to get great coffee here to Illinois and the United States. The goal of this project is to create a vibrant, information sharing, robust, multifaceted economy in Western Kenya, built around tourism, but also the raw agricultural products of Western Kenya.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. As you know, Tom, I would consider myself an uncomfortable but a capitalist. And however, I believe in a real simple economic theory called win-win. And it sounds like this is definitely a win-win equation. And I know when I came out of Hansa yesterday, is this your logo?
Dan can tell you a little bit about what that logo entails and why it's actually an important piece of what we're doing.
So you can see, of course, the name Asali Hills, but the wavy lines, they're there to represent not only the hills, but then that drip line is, of course, the coffee coming out of it, and then the shape resembles that of the beehive, the comb, or the honeycomb, I should say. So you've got that as well. So it's all, representative within that logo.
Thank you. I'm honored again that you reached out to me. The coffee's great. Very interesting hearing your story. Dan, at some point, I'd love to hear even more about archaeology. That's a passion of mine as well. So, in history, but it's been a pleasure to have you both here with us visiting today. And God bless you and continue to, on your mission here. It's very interesting.
Thank you very much for having us. I'm honored as well. And I know the farm, and I know Chap is very happy and honored to have us do this today. So
The next time we do this, we're going to do this face to face on the farm, drinking some coffee during a harvest. How's that sound?
That sounds
and I'll
ideal.
take you on a hike. We'll go look at the sites together as well. We'll go into the rock shelters and the caves. There's wonders out there. It's absolutely beautiful, big, vast cave systems that we can explore. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dan Melone and Tom Maegdlin of Hansa. I'm still drinking this coffee. Fabulous in a siphon or Chemex or auto drip as well. I'd like to thank Jacques Chalot and his Creeby Coffee organization who sponsors these CoffeeCon get-togethers. His concept of on-site, in-store air roasting is one I think is the future, and right now it is the fastest, freshest coffee you can buy. I'm Coffee Kevin.